Hello, first generation students, family, friends, and supporters, and welcome to First Generation Celebration Week 2022. My name is Derek. No, my name is Spider Man, and I am proud to welcome you to First Generation Celebration Week 2022. If you are first in your family to earn your degree in the United States, this celebration is for you. Our theme of this year is First Gen Heroes. As First Gen students, we all have our very special superpowers. We are so proud to be celebrating you this week together as one giant UTD First Generation family. Welcome. Today, Monday, November 7th, 2022, is our official keynote and kickoff movie screening for First Generation Celebration Week 2022. I want to take a little bit to talk about our keynote speaker, Dr. Latanya L.T. Miles. Dr. Miles is a first generation graduate. She is an avid superhero fan, specifically The Flash, another universe, but that's okay. And she is here to share some important words of support, share her story, and most of all, share in the collective celebration of first generation students here at UT Dallas. Dr. LT earned her PhD from UCLA, and her research interests center on the hidden curriculum. You may have heard about that. We talk about that a lot. These are the unwritten rules for operating in higher education, and she's very passionate about first generation student advocacy and first generation student success. Dr. LT is really well known, so this is a really big get for us here at UT Dallas. Dr. LT currently works with Career Launch Academy, where she supports first generation students in their drives and journeys into the career and internship and occupation of their choice. We are so very honored to have Dr. LT with us today to kick off First Generation Celebration Week. And with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. LT live from Star Labs.
Why, hello there, UT Dallas. It's a pleasure to meet you and to hang out with you and to be able to celebrate with you this week for National First Generation Celebration. I'm Dr. LT, and I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about my interests and talking specifically about being a first gen student and having your superpower. So allow me to talk to you a little bit about me before I do that. So here is a little bit about myself. So I send you greetings from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a native of the Washington, D.C. area. I'm a proud first generation college graduate as well. But here you can see a little bit more about me and some of my specific interests. I'm a longtime friend and fan of UT Dallas and their First Gen initiative. So it is my honor and pleasure to spend some time with you today. My current role is Director of Scale and Support at a social enterprise called Career Launch. One other thing I want to mention is that I'm also a proud transfer student as well. So shout out to all you transfers. All right, but let me go back a little bit because you could find some of this information, and I hope you do connect with me on LinkedIn if you're already on that platform. But sometimes what you don't see are all the things that led us to the places where we are. So here's a little bit about my origin story, my first gen origin story. So I was raised by a single parent in the Washington, D.C. area. I come from a working class background. I don't come from a college going background, come from a military family, as well as family that worked in the local post office. I mentioned I was a transfer student. I was an English major, and I also received my PhD in English from UCLA. So like I said, now in the state of California. I also want to give a shout out to my family of origin as well. This is my extended family here, and they're always a big part of me no matter where I go. But one of the things that I've been asked to speak with you all about specifically is about being a first generation student. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. And sometimes, again, we can often forget about the strengths that come with us when we start college. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. What does it mean to be a first generation student? In other words, what's your superpower as a first gen student? I want you to take a minute to think about that. What are some of the things you may have overcome? Was your source of creativity and art? Of course, this is going to be a big part of Miles Morales' story as well. But I wanted to talk about some specific things that sometimes people tend to overlook when you're the first in your family to go to college, and not just focus on the challenges, but focus on the strengths, your resilience, persistent, maybe you're multilingual, speaking different languages at home versus at school, going back and forth, being independent and pioneering. But again, like I said, sometimes we tend to forget those types of, we forget what our strengths are, right? I know for me, when I was a student and I was thinking about what I wanted to major in, and I had a really difficult time choosing what my major was. And I remember specifically, there was a mentor of mine who once said to me, "You know what, Latanya, you read all the time. Why don't you just major in English?" Friends, can I tell you that was mind blowing for me because I thought your major had to be something really difficult and really challenging. For me, I thought reading just comes naturally to me, right? I just write papers all the time. You can't major in that. Well, when I think about that now, I think about how a bit silly and naive it was. Of course, your major should be something that you're really good at. But again, there are times, not just as first gen students, but sometimes we as humans tend to downplay our natural gifts and not think of them as something that is a source of strength or something that's unique to us. That, of course, leads us to why it's important to talk about superheroes. What is the superhero in us? For me, sometimes people ask, why do you love the Flash? As you can see, I'm a big fan of the Flash here. Why do you love the Flash so much? Well, I thought about that. And one of my other gifts, especially when I was younger, was being really fast. I used to run all the time, sprint all the time, not long distance run. And I never thought of that as a superpower, right? When I thought of superpowers, I often thought of flying or strength or things like that. So I think one of the things that attracts me to a character like the Flash is that his ability is something that often comes seems so natural, but at the end, and it saves lives, but not something that's super fantastic, not like Thor or things like that. So I loved the sort of ordinariness of being the Flash, of just running fast, and that's your superpower. So again, just want to remind you, some of your own gifts and talents may feel very ordinary to you, but I just want to remind you of how important they are and how unique they are as well. One of the things I've been able to study quite a bit is particularly the first generation story in popular culture. That's something that brings me a lot of joy and something I'm also really good at. And I hope at this time you're thinking about all the things that you are particularly good at. So I've been able to spend a good amount of my career lately focused specifically on first generation students in popular culture, in TV shows, films, podcasts, movies, books. So that includes fictional characters like those in the series Grand Army, or real life folks. So celebrities or other notable figures who also are identified as first generation college, like Eva Longoria right here, proud first generation graduate. And then if we narrow it down even more, especially for the topic at hand, I know you're super excited to watch the Miles Morales movie coming up next. But I'm also focusing specifically on first gens in the superhero universe, including characters like Eric Killmonger and Black Panther. All right, so gearing up for the topic at hand, this idea of being first generation is very, very common in superhero narratives. Now, they may not be using the word or the phrase first generation to college, but that narrative is certainly there. So that would include both Superman and, of course, Spider-Man. So the Peter Parker story has historically been one of a young man from humble beginnings who would go on to be the first in his family to go to college. That's very consistent, with one major exception in the films about the character of Peter Parker. The storyline came about most recently in the live action version of Spider-Man that came out this year. I don't know if some of you saw this or if this moment struck you, where Peter here is talking to Doctor Strange. He's feeling very frustrated because his identity is being known. So he wants to go back in time and be allowed to be admitted into MIT, his school of choice. And so he's come to Doctor Strange and had Doctor Strange to say, and he's come to Doctor Strange and asked him, go back in time so that I can get admitted into college, so that my friends can get admitted into college. And then at one point, Doctor Strange says to him, didn't you just call? Couldn't you just call and talk to someone? And Peter had this moment where, like, what? You can do that? I don't know if you all remember that from the movie. That's a very first gen storyline. That how would you know that you can make an intervention, that you can call someone about your admissions? And so those are the types of the stories that I'm really interested in and pay attention to. And so I want you to do something similar when you are watching the Miles Morales story, a new version of the Spider-Man story. Here's the thing about Peter Parker and Miles Morales. They're often considered outsiders to this hero universe, right? Because of their age, but also because of their backgrounds. Believe it or not, if you pay attention, a lot of the other Avengers come from very privileged backgrounds. Of course, Tony Stark is a major example of that. And if you recall, in the Peter Parker universe, he mentors Tony Stark mentors Peter Parker with all of his wealth and all of his access. Both Peter Parker and Miles Morales don't come from that kind of tradition. So it makes sense that you would be studying that narrative today, right? And I wonder if you have any personal connections to the Miles story. So here's what I want you to think about as you're watching this movie. Who is in Miles's support system? When the movie opens up, Miles is transitioning between two different worlds when it comes to school and education. And some of you may be feeling that same way too, right? So who is in Miles's support system? Who are your people? Who's in your support system? If you don't have someone, start to think about who you might reach out to. What mistakes does Miles make? But most importantly, how does he recover from them? And one of the major themes of this movie is great expectations. And so I wanted to ask you, what expectations do you have for yourself? What expectations do others have for you? And what do you expect from others? It's absolutely within your right to expect things from your campus or institution. So I want to encourage you to speak up and ask and request them. Here's a quote from one of my all-time favorite songs, which gets me going, Lose Yourself by Eminem. But it's also really important when we think about Miles's story and the moment that he faces. So if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted, one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? So remember to lose yourself. I want to thank you all so much for your time today. And again, I want you to remember to identify what your strengths are, but most importantly, to value what your strengths are. That's the most important thing. Sometimes we forget along the way all the things that got us to where we are. And if you have some ideas or you come across any other narratives about first generation students on TV shows, books, podcasts, etc., let me know. Send your ideas to First Gen and Juice on Instagram. That's where you can find me at First Gen and Juice. Thank you all so much. Please enjoy the movie and let me know what you think of it. Happy First Gen Day.
Thank you, Dr. LT, for those wonderful remarks. As you can all tell, Dr. LT is really passionate about first generation student success, and increasing the representation of first-generation students like Miles Morales in popular culture. Thank you so much, LT. We really appreciate it. Now let's get the celebration started, and let's watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.